Afternoon, class. My name is Mr. A, and we're going to continue our discussion on the novel Lord of the Flies. Alright, so as you'll see, I've listed on the board 5 of our vocabulary words that we're going to be focused on for the lesson. These are protagonist, antagonist, savagery, indignant, and mutinous. Alright, so we'll go ahead and start off with our first one, protagonist. The protagonist is going to be your main character in the story. When the story first starts off, we're not quite sure if our protagonist is going to be Ralph or Jack. Both boys land on the island, and they're seen as leaders. Now, initially, we're met by Ralph, who leads his group of boys, especially one of our main characters, Piggy. He shows to be the more caring of the two boys and wants to look out for their best interests. As the story progresses, we see that Jack evolves more into our antagonist. Our antagonist is the character who opposes the main character. He quickly shows that his internal feelings are rage, lack of respect for rules, and clearly wants to disobey the natural order. He is initially upset that Ralph is chosen as our leader of the group, but he is quickly promoted to lead the boys who are the hunters, which he is very excited about, which we learned. Remember we read about that? Alright, next we'll move on to savagery, which means fierce or cruel. We could clearly see, especially toward as the book started coming to a close, that Jack and his group of boys were very savage. They were willing to hurt anyone that got in their way and had a clear disrespect for the rules of natural order. Indignant. This is anger for something that is perceived as unfair. Initially, we're not sure of what Jack's intentions are, but it quickly becomes clear that he is indignant that he was not chosen as the leader of the boys. He felt that he was the natural leader, yet the rest of the boys felt that Ralph would be more well-suited to lead them. Finally, mutinous. This is summed up as disobedient. The group of boys quickly become mutinous as things start to decay and dissolve. The rules no longer mean anything to them, and they decide they no longer want to follow what society feels is natural law. All right. There are many, many themes present throughout this book. Some clear, some hidden, some we need to break down and look into. So our first theme that we're going to start focusing on is humanity's impulse toward savage nature. So naturally, the book states that internally, we're all savage. The boys are stranded on a deserted island with no adults and no rules. And their initial thought is to become savages. They want to get away from the rules that have bound them their entire lives. They want to start acting on their own impulses. Ralph opposes this. He feels that a natural order should be set and that rules are important to keep a society moving. He finds the conch. Remember, very important in the story. Which the boys are told they cannot speak without holding. It is also used to summon the boys to any location where they're going to need to hold a meeting or have a conversation. We see, as the story keeps going and the boys become more proficient hunters, we see Jack's savagery. He feels there's no need for rules and that their society can function without them. Ultimately, he is the one who destroys the conch, which is, in turn, the destruction of rules and natural order. Another very important theme is survival, especially survival of the fittest. Piggy, one of the first boys we're introduced to, is what some may consider weaker, as a couple students pointed out. Maybe the more intelligent, but not willing to act as much as Ralph and Jack are. He is jumped on by the boys who are the hunters and who follow Jack. They taunt him, they tease him, and ultimately this leads to Piggy's death. And since we've already finished the book and I'm not ruining anything, when it comes to the conclusion, the boys who have survived throughout this whole ordeal hunt down Ralph and try to kill him. Our final major theme of this novel is loss of innocence. The longer the boys are on the island, the less innocent they become. They start to lose their boyishness, and they start to develop into, I don't know if we would quite call them men, but their animalistic nature starts to boil to the surface. And we see the more time they spend on the island, the dirtier they start to become. They spend time out in the dirt, out in the mud, in the water, and this is really a reflection of who they are on the inside, coming outward. They've lost all respect for rules, for societal norms, and instead they're concerned with hunting, eating, and surviving. Symbolism is key in the story. We already covered the conch, which is symbolic for order, law, and is ultimately destroyed as the boys choose to forgo any semblance of law and order and instead choose to live like the savages. Our next major symbolism is shown to us right as the book starts out. When the plane crashes, Mr. Golding makes it very clear that there is a scar left down the middle of the island. A burning scar. And what this is meant to represent is man's destruction of beauty. So, Mr. Golding had spent some time serving in the Second World War and had seen some atrocious things happen and had seen men do some horrific things to one another. His own personal view was that anything man touched was destroyed. And he wanted to make that very clear by showing the scar, the deep tear left in the island by these boys and their actions. As the book continues, the boys try to light a fire to signal for any ships or planes that may come by, and ultimately end up burning up large portions of the island. As we know in the very end, the whole island is lit ablaze in order to try and kill Ralph, which ultimately ends up signaling a passing by ship to come and save them. But destruction is a key symbol throughout this book. And there are many different things that are shown to symbolize it. I don't know how I could leave out the most important. Our title, guys, the title of the book itself is a symbol. The Lord of the Flies. Now, the Lord of the Flies is one of the many names of Satan. It's the devil, right there. Now, we know when the boys go and hunt that pig and take its head off, they've totally lost any nature or semblance of themselves that they once knew, and have now embraced a deity on the island. And one of the boys, as he talks to the pig head, tells him that it itself is called the Lord of the Flies. So we know at this point the boys have nothing left in them. Their animalistic nature has completely taken over, and they are symbols for, I don't know if I could quite say advocates of Satan, but they no longer show any sense of humanity within themselves. All right. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. It was great for me, and I think I